But you see in the case of that cartoon, he's looking at a cloud and he's seeing image. He's just picking up the image. So one thing you can do is try to develop the ability to think with another kind of sense. One of the ways of doing it is working on thinking in pictures. Seeing something and then remembering it as a picture, not as a word. Or, if you happen to be somebody who is auditory, thinking about something in terms of sound. Or thinking about something in terms of, in fact, I mean, certain sounds are supposed to develop brains. You know, Bach is always supposed to be a great brain developer. Thinking about certain things in terms of smell, a very potent method of recollecting. But work on different senses and also be present in observing something and not thinking about it in words. So if I look at curtain, you know, I am so verbal. I am thinking about that and I'm seeing, you know, curtain. I'm saying it in a sense. Try not to do that. Try to look at that and actually see folds of blue material. Just experience the folds. So just as there are enhancers of equipment, there are also detractors. I am a gremlin of the first order. I have a terrifically bad effect on equipment. Friday, my staff was in stitches because I did something and I practically erased my entire hard drive. It suddenly everything on my desktop just suddenly disappeared. If I'm in an agitated mood, which is only occasionally, I start breaking every piece of equipment in our office. I break computers, and then there was one time I was really agitated. I broke one computer. I went, ah! I went over to another computer. I broke that. And then I went over to the photocopier to photocopy, and that stopped working. And at that point, my staff started edging me toward the door. So there are enhancers and detractors, and I just want you to consider that when you are in a bad mood, you are sending out to your environment, including your inanimate equipment. We have so much evidence from the random event generator studies that you have a profound effect on electronic equipment. So just bear it in mind. I put this thing up, are your motives pure? Because there was a very interesting study of alcoholics. It was a prayer study. And what they did was divided a group of alcoholics in two, and half of them prayed for by their nearest and dearest. And the researchers were astonished to find that the people receiving prayer did worse than the others. Now, they were fascinated by this, and they interpreted this to mean that the people sending intention had mixed motives. They could have been people who were sending intention for increased survival and for them to stop drinking, but not really mean it. You know, alcoholics are tough to live with. They could have been sending intention, an unconscious intention, for that person to die and to free them. Or they could be a codependent. They could be somebody who was also a drinker and didn't want to lose his or her drinking buddy. So when you're sending intention, it's important to think about what it is you're really sending. You know, we all pretend to send happy thoughts, including to people who we don't like very much. But we have to try to get to that place of real sense of compassion and real understanding of what it is we're sending. I just want to look at this whole idea, too, of psychic bubble. A lot of people think of protection as just that, a wall. You know, I want to create a psychic bubble around myself so that all the awful people at work who are constantly glaring at me or sniping at me or whatever can't get to me. I want you to think about this in terms of what we've talked about all weekend. If we are all one, if we are trying to establish connection, the last thing you want to do is create a psychic bubble, a barrier to that. Besides which, I'm not clear that it works. There have been 2 studies of this by William Broad, the guy whose name I couldn't remember yesterday, the psychologist. I had a senior moment, I guess. William Broad did a lot of work on seeing if you could psychically shield yourself from intention. So he would have two groups, one sending intention to the other, and oftentimes when they do these kinds of studies, they register the effect by measuring the autonomic nervous system of the recipient. And they find when somebody sends an intention, even if they stare at the other person without the person knowing it, the recipient will receive a change in his autonomic nervous system, almost like a shock. So we're constantly picking up all the time. It's been demonstrated. So he wanted to see if the recipients could think of a barrier to this. And so he had them think of whatever barrier worked for them, a moat, a brick wall, anything like that. And he found, in one case, it worked. The people thinking of a wall, etc., would stop that kind of effect on the autonomic nervous system. They would, in a sense, protect themselves. They tried to replicate it, and they found it didn't work. So I think from there, there's no good evidence to show that works, and it also doesn't make sense. If you're trying to open yourself up to intention, I think there's a better way. I think instead of protection, you want surrender. And let me suggest this in certain ways. I think you look at protecting yourself from the perspective of relationship. There are two ways to see this. One is the idea that it's not a single bad thing coming to you, but it's the relationship. You know, Clinton's comment, it's the economy stupid. It's almost like we need to say, is the relationship stupid to ourselves? And of course, not really calling ourselves stupid, because that would be a negative intention. But just constantly thinking of it ourselves